Please help me to reach 7,000 subscribers. Emily always believed her life was finally settling into the rhythm she had spent years praying for. Early mornings at her Chicago campus, late-night study sessions in the library, and weekend coffee runs with Ryan felt like the perfect balance. She worked hard and she loved harder. Ryan wasn't just her boyfriend, he was the one person she trusted more than anyone. He knew her dreams, her fears, her habits, even how she took her coffee. Everyone said they were the couple that made sense, the two people who would make it past all the storms. And she believed them. She had no reason not to. Ryan was sweet, funny, thoughtful in his own way, always showing up when she needed him. They talked about moving to Seattle after graduation, finding a tiny apartment near the water, maybe starting a business together someday. It wasn't a fantasy to her, it was a plan, a future she held onto with both hands. But the thing about perfect lives is, they can fall apart in seconds, and Emily didn't see the first crack until the day his phone buzzed in her hand. It wasn't intentional, she wasn't snooping. She had only picked up his phone from the couch to move it out of the way when she saw a message pop up. A heart emoji from someone saved as M. At first, she smiled to herself. She assumed it was a cousin or maybe a coworker. It didn't even cross her mind that it could be anything more. She knew Ryan, she trusted Ryan. She wasn't the paranoid type. But then his phone buzzed again, and again, and again. Something felt off, not because she suspected betrayal, but because Ryan never got this many messages from anyone but her. Her heart began to beat faster, confused, not suspicious. She placed the phone back where it was and walked away, telling herself it wasn't her business. She didn't like the feeling in her stomach, but she forced herself to breathe. She wasn't going to jump to conclusions. Except the next day, the same name appeared on the screen again, and the next. And soon Ryan had begun stepping out of the room more often, taking calls outside, turning his phone face down, something he had never done before. Emily tried to talk herself out of the sinking feeling growing inside her. She reminded herself he was stressed, nearing graduation, juggling an internship. People changed when they were overwhelmed. She understood that. She was patient, maybe too patient. But the first real punch to her chest came one Friday night when Ryan told her he had to work late. It wasn't unusual. He often stayed longer at the firm where he interned. But when Emily called to ask if he wanted dinner, his voice sounded distant, distracted, like he wasn't really there. She brushed it off, thinking he was tired. What she didn't expect was the Uber ride home through downtown Chicago. She didn't expect the red light at the exact intersection. She definitely didn't expect to glance outside the window and see Ryan across the street. Not alone, he was laughing, smiling, leaning in close to a woman whose hair looked painfully familiar. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She pressed her hand to the window, almost hoping she was imagining it. Her vision blurred, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. She leaned closer, squinting past the reflection on the glass, and that's when she saw it clearly. The girl wasn't just any. She was someone Emily knew, someone she trusted. And the way Ryan looked at her, the way she touched his arm, none of it looked innocent. The Uber moved forward as the light turned green, but Emily couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened as if someone had reached inside and squeezed her heart until it cracked. She felt hot tears forming, but she refused to let them fall, not yet, not until she knew the truth. All the signs she had ignored, the calls, the texts, the sudden distance, crashed together like a storm she never saw coming. Her perfect life, her perfect relationship, her perfect trust, all of it felt like a lie now. That night, back in her apartment, she sat on the edge of her bed shaking, struggling to breathe through the ache in her chest. Every memory she had with Ryan felt poisoned. Every moment of love felt like a joke she didn't understand the punchline to. And somewhere in the middle of her heartbreak, she whispered to herself, almost begging, almost praying, "Please tell me I'm wrong. Please tell me this isn't what it looks like." But deep down, she already knew. Her perfect life had just shattered, and the pieces were sharp enough to cut her again and again. If you've ever had your heart break without warning, you know how this moment feels. And if you're listening right now, tell me in the comments, have you ever trusted someone so much only to find out they weren't who you thought they were? Emily didn't sleep that night. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment she saw Ryan laughing with that familiar figure. Every second that passed made her chest tighten even more. By morning, exhaustion pressed against her bones, but the truth pressing against her heart felt heavier. She needed answers. She needed the truth, not assumptions, not guesses, not the stories her mind kept creating to protect her from the pain. She needed to hear it from someone she trusted, someone who would never lie to her. So she called Megan, her best friend since freshman year. The girl she shared secrets with, the girl she trusted with everything. The girl she believed would stand beside her through every season of life. Megan picked up on the second ring, her voice sounding cheerful, almost too cheerful for the weight crushing Emily's chest. "Hey Em, what's up?" Emily tried to speak, but her throat tightened. She swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Can you come over, please? It's important." Megan paused, then agreed instantly. Of course she would, that's what best friends do. Emily told herself over and over that she was overreacting, that this wasn't what it looked like, that Megan would explain everything. She clung to that hope like it was the only thing keeping her breathing. But when Megan arrived, the moment their eyes met, Emily felt something inside her collapse. Megan wouldn't look directly at her. Her smile seemed strained, her body language guilty, and suddenly the truth didn't feel like a question anymore. It felt like a verdict. Emily took a deep breath, standing in her living room with trembling hands. "I saw Ryan last night," she said quietly. "He wasn't alone." Room felt like it froze. Megan's face went pale, her fingers twitched, her eyes darted away, and Emily's stomach twisted. She whispered the words she prayed she'd never have to say. "Was it you, Megan? Please just tell me the truth." Megan's silence was louder than confession, louder than denial, louder than any excuse she could have given. With every second that passed, Emily felt her heart breaking in a new way, not just because of Ryan, but because of the girl she believed would never betray her. Finally, Megan whispered, "Emily, I didn't mean for it to happen." The words hit harder than anything Ryan had done. Emily felt her knees weaken. She stumbled back, staring at Megan like she was looking at a stranger. "You didn't mean for it to happen, Megan. You were my best friend." Megan's eyes filled with tears, but her tears didn't soothe the pain, they sharpened it. "I was lonely, Ryan was there, we didn't plan it," she stammered. Emily's voice cracked, her chest burning. "You didn't plan it, but you kept doing it. How many times? How long?" Megan didn't answer. She didn't have to. Emily covered her face with shaking hands, heartbreak turning into anger, betrayal, disbelief. She trusted Megan more than anyone. She told her everything about her relationship. She invited her to dinners, shared her dreams, called her sister. And Megan used that access to steal the one person Emily loved most. Emily forced herself to breathe through the storm inside her. "I defended you, I trusted you. When people said you got too comfortable around Ryan, I told them you would never do something like that." Megan cried harder, trying to reach out, but Emily stepped back. "Don't," she whispered. "You don't get to touch me, you don't get to comfort me, not when you're the one who broke me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Megan whispered, "Emily, please forgive me." Those words, those desperate, empty words, felt like salt in an open wound. Emily wiped her tears, standing straighter than she felt. "I don't hate you," she said softly, "but I can't keep you in my life, not after this. You didn't just take my boyfriend, you took my trust, my peace." Megan broke down, but Emily's tears stopped. Something inside her hardened, not bitterness, but clarity. She opened the door. "Please leave." Megan stepped outside with shaking legs, whispering one last apology before the door closed between them forever. Emily leaned against it, breathing through the ache in her chest. Betrayal by a lover hurts, but betrayal by a best friend destroys something deeper, something you can't rebuild easily. She slid down to the floor, hugging her knees as tears finally poured freely, not because she was weak, but because she had trusted the wrong people with pieces of her heart. The days after Megan's betrayal felt like walking through a world that no longer belonged to her. Chicago looked the same, the buildings stood tall, the trains still screeched past on their tracks, the coffee shops still buzzed with life, but Emily felt disconnected from all of it. She went through the motions, class, work, studying, but her heart wasn't there anymore. Everywhere she looked, she saw pieces of the life she used to have. A couple holding hands on the sidewalk felt like a punch to the stomach. A group of friends laughing at a cafe made her chest tight. She wasn't jealous, she was grieving. Grieving the trust she lost, the friendship she lost, the version of herself she lost. Her roommate, Claire, noticed. After watching Emily move like a shadow for a week, she marched into her room holding 2 dresses and said, "You're coming with me to the Lakeshore Charity Gala, no excuses." Emily tried to refuse, but Claire wouldn't hear it. "You need air, you need noise, you need a room full of people who don't know your heartbreak." So, reluctantly, Emily agreed. The gala was held in a stunning glass tower near Lake Michigan, glowing warm gold against the cold Chicago night. Emily walked inside feeling awkward, out of place, still carrying the weight of everything she couldn't say out loud. Claire disappeared quickly into a crowd of business partners, leaving Emily clutching a sparkling water and standing near a balcony overlooking the city. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the cold breeze hit her face. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. That's when she heard a deep, steady voice behind her. Rough night. She turned around and found herself staring at a man who didn't quite fit the room, not because he didn't belong, but because it felt like everyone else in the space bent slightly around his presence. He was older, maybe mid-40s, sharply dressed in a charcoal suit that looked custom-made, with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to say his name for people to know it. Emily blinked, caught off guard. "Is it that obvious?" he smiled, a warm but slightly amused expression. "No," he said gently, "but I know the look of someone carrying too much weight on their shoulders." She gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "You must be very observant." "Occupational hazard," he replied with a shrug. Emily expected the conversation to end there, small talk, polite smiles, nothing more, but something about him felt grounding, steady, safe in a way she couldn't explain. He extended a hand. "I'm Alexander," she shook it. "Emily." His eyebrow lifted slightly as if committing the name to memory. "Well, Emily, since you seem determined to spend your night hiding near this balcony, may I offer a distraction?" She hesitated, but his tone wasn't flirty or intrusive, it was simply kind. "What kind of distraction?" "The kind that comes with decent company and absolutely no pressure to pretend you're fine." For the first time in weeks, she smiled, a real one, small but genuine. They found a quieter corner of the ballroom, and to her surprise, talking to him felt easy. He was sharp, thoughtful, surprisingly funny in a dry, unexpected way. They talked about the city, her major, his work, her ambitions, and somehow he managed to make her forget even briefly about the ache inside her chest. Alexander didn't pry, didn't ask why she looked sad, didn't dig into her wounds. Instead, he made her feel seen without being studied. Understood without having to explain everything. Hours passed without her noticing. At one point, she caught herself laughing, a sound she hadn't heard from her own mouth in what felt like forever. When she finally stood to leave, Alexander's expression softened. "I hope tonight made things a little lighter for you." "It did," she admitted, "more than you know." He reached into his pocket and handed her a simple business card, nothing flashy, just his name and one number. "If you ever need a conversation or someone who listens without judgment, call me." She took the card, feeling a strange flutter in her stomach. Not romantic, not yet, something else, something like possibility. As she walked toward the exit, she glanced back one last time. Alexander was watching her, not with hunger, not with flirtation, but with a quiet curiosity, like he knew their paths crossing tonight wasn't just coincidence. Emily stepped into the cold night with a tiny spark inside her, the first spark she'd felt since everything fell apart. She didn't know who Alexander really was. She didn't know how deeply he would eventually change her life. She didn't know what this unexpected encounter was about to lead to. She only knew one thing: sometimes the right person appears exactly when your heart has forgotten it deserves more. And if you're listening, tell me in the comments, do you believe people come into our lives for a reason, or is it all coincidence? Emily never imagined her life could flip so fast. Just weeks ago, she was crying on the floor of her tiny apartment, trying to understand how the man she had loved for 4 years threw everything away for a shallow office fling. She remembered staring at her reflection, wondering what was wrong with her, wondering why loyalty seemed so cheap to the people she trusted most. But now, standing on the rooftop terrace of a New York penthouse, when she never would have stepped foot in before, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: peace. The city lights shimmered beneath her like 1,000 tiny promises, and the wind carried the faint scent of something new, something safe. The man beside her, the one she had met by pure accident, the one whose kindness felt like a warm breath against a freezing night, looked at her with a softness she didn't know she deserved. He never treated her like she was broken. He treated her like she was becoming. He reached into his jacket, and for a moment, Emily's heart froze. She wasn't ready. Her past still echoed inside her, and part of her wondered if she was allowed to accept happiness again. But when he spoke, his voice wasn't asking her to forget what hurt. He was asking her to rise above it. He told her he saw strength in her eyes even on the days she couldn't see it herself, that she wasn't defined by a man who couldn't value her, but by the way she kept walking even when her world collapsed. When he opened the ring box, the world seemed to pause with her. The diamond caught the light, but it wasn't the ring that made her breath hitch. It was the moment she realized someone finally chose her with intention, not convenience. Someone saw her future, not her damage. Someone wanted to build, not break. Emily felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with the overwhelming sense that maybe, just maybe, she had been rerouted toward something far better than what she lost. Her eyes filled, her hands trembled, and for the first time she didn't think about the man who betrayed her or the friend who stabbed her in the back. She only thought of this new heartbeat beside her, steady, patient, and real. As she whispered her answer, the city seemed to glow brighter, as if celebrating the girl who survived, the girl who healed, the girl who finally found someone who understood her worth. What was once heartbreak now felt like the doorway to a life she never dared dream of, one where she was cherished, respected, and loved without conditions. If you've ever been replaced, betrayed, or made to feel small, remember Emily's story. Sometimes the greatest blessings walk into your life right after everything collapses. Sometimes losing the wrong person is the only way to find the right one. And sometimes the universe waits until you're shattered to hand you something unbreakable. Emily's new life didn't begin with champagne or designer dresses. It began the moment she realized she no longer had to shrink herself for anyone. Walking through the grand halls of her husband's estate, now her home, she felt a kind of strength settle into her bones. Not because of the wealth, not because of the luxury, but because she finally had the freedom to breathe without fear of being betrayed. For the first time in years, she felt untouchable, and that confidence changed everything. People who once ignored her suddenly treated her with a kind of nervous respect. Doors opened when she approached. Conversations stopped when she walked by. And while she never sought the spotlight, she quickly learned that power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet awareness that you no longer owe anyone an explanation. Her former boyfriend, the man who had shattered her heart like it was something disposable, didn't take long to notice her transformation. He saw the photos online, the charity gala, the boardroom events, the elegant dinners, and each image cut deeper than anything Emily could have said. He watched her glow in ways she never did with him, not because she wasn't capable, but because he never gave her space to become who she was meant to be. Now the world was seeing what he threw away without a second thought. His messages started small. A "Hey, hope you're good," then a "We should talk," then long, rambling paragraphs about missing her, regretting everything, wishing he could undo the past. Emily didn't need revenge because life had already carried it out with perfect timing. The man who cheated with her best friend was now begging for just a moment of her attention, but Emily had outgrown him in every possible way. She didn't respond, not out of anger, but out of peace. She was no longer the girl who needed closure. She had built a life that was its own answer. The sweetest justice came one afternoon when she attended a major business conference beside her husband. As they walked through the crowd, she spotted her ex in the distance, slumped, defeated, painfully aware of what he'd lost. Their eyes met for half a second. His were full of regret. Hers were full of calm. She didn't glare, didn't smirk, didn't even slow down. She simply held her head high, fingers interlocked with the hand of the man who valued her worth from the very beginning. That moment wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the pieces of herself she once gave away too easily. She realized she didn't need to destroy anyone to rise. She just needed to stop looking back. And life rewarded her with something better than revenge: self-respect, stability, and a love that honored her. If you've ever wondered whether karma really comes through, Emily's story is your reminder. Sometimes the universe takes its time, but when justice arrives, it arrives quietly, gracefully, and with perfect precision. Ryan never thought he'd see her again, not like this. Not in a world where she was untouchable, confident, radiant, and untied from the chains of their past. He had imagined she'd be crying, begging, desperate for him to fix the mess he made. He had imagined her weak, unsure, broken. But as he walked up to the grand entrance of the Hale estate, he realized he had been living in a fantasy. Emily opened the door herself. She didn't call for a security guard, didn't let anyone else deal with him. She stood there calm, composed, her posture relaxed but strong. The same girl who once trembled at his lies now looked at him with a quiet authority that made his chest tight. "Emily," he started, his voice faltering, unsure. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, I messed up, I can't stop thinking about you, please give me another chance." She let him speak, the words washing over her like water she didn't need. Her heart no longer jumped at his voice. Her mind no longer spun at the thought of his apologies. She had already done the work he refused to do. She had built herself back, stronger, better, and free. "Ryan," she said softly, carefully, "you're right. You did mess up. You hurt me and you hurt yourself by showing me exactly who you are. But I don't need another chance from you. I needed a chance to see myself clearly, and I got it." He faltered as if the ground had vanished beneath him. "Emily. Please, I can change. "You don't get to change me, Ryan," she interrupted, her voice firm but steady. "You don't get to rewrite the past. I'm not bitter, I'm not seeking revenge, I'm not angry anymore, I'm just done." He looked at her, eyes wide, desperate, realizing too late that the girl he took for granted was no longer hers to take. The Emily he knew was gone, replaced by someone unbreakable, someone who didn't need him, someone who thrived despite him. She stepped aside, letting him leave, and watched as his shoulders slumped, his steps heavy, the weight of regret pressing down on him. Emily didn't gloat, she didn't mock, she didn't shout, she simply let the door close on him and on that chapter of her life. Turning back, she smiled faintly, glancing at Alexander waiting behind her with quiet pride. There was no need for celebration, no need for vindication. The closure wasn't loud, it was quiet, decisive, and complete. Emily realized the most powerful revenge is living well. The most satisfying justice isn't in tearing someone down, it's in building yourself up beyond their reach. And for the first time in months, she felt fully at peace. Emily woke up one morning in her new life feeling something she hadn't felt in years: certainty. The sun poured through the large windows of her penthouse, highlighting the elegance of a space that was now both hers and Alexander's. But the real wealth wasn't in the marble floors, the view of Chicago's skyline, or the luxury she had stepped into. It was in the life she was finally allowed to create, free from lies, betrayal, and doubt. Every morning she walked into her office, a space she had helped design not as a guest but as a partner. Alexander trusted her instincts, valued her opinions, and celebrated her successes. She wasn't just a wife, she was a co-architect of their empire. Decisions she made mattered. Her voice carried weight. For the first time, Emily saw that stability didn't come from the absence of struggle, it came from respect and love, both earned and given freely. Evenings were no longer filled with anxiety or second-guessing. Dinner meant laughter, deep conversation, and shared dreams. She didn't have to pretend to be someone else. She could be her whole self, the girl who loved passionately, worked tirelessly, and now thrived confidently. The same girl who Ryan had taken for granted had grown into someone unstoppable, someone Alexander recognized and celebrated every single day. Outside of their personal life, Emily became a figure of inspiration. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers admired her resilience. Her story of heartbreak and redemption resonated not as gossip, but as proof that strength, courage, and patience can transform even the deepest wounds into triumph. People reached out asking for guidance, advice, or just a word of encouragement. Emily gave generously because she knew firsthand the power of being supported and of finding your own power in the process. Ryan's presence became a distant memory. Megan faded further into the background, replaced by people who genuinely uplifted her. And in their place, Emily built a life of purpose, ambition, and most importantly, mutual respect. Alexander's love was unwavering, but it wasn't overbearing. They were partners, equals, a team. And for the first time, Emily understood that true security didn't come from money. It came from being valued, respected, and genuinely loved. She often thought back to the girl who cried on the floor of her tiny apartment, the girl who had been heartbroken, betrayed, and lost. She smiled at her now, grateful she had survived it all because survival had led her here, to a life of freedom, love, and endless possibilities. If you've ever felt unappreciated, undervalued, or lost, remember Emily's journey. Your worth isn't defined by those who couldn't see it. And sometimes the life you deserve only appears when you refuse to settle for anything less. Drop a comment if this resonates. Have you ever transformed heartbreak into your greatest strength? How did it change your life? Emily's journey wasn't just about heartbreak, betrayal, or unexpected love. It was about discovering her own value. She had learned the hard way that letting someone else define your worth only leads to pain, regret, and lost time. The lessons she carried now were simple but powerful. Trust wisely, stand firm in your principles, and never settle for less than the respect and love you deserve. She looked around at the life she had built, her successful career, the partnership she shared with Alexander, the friendships that uplifted rather than drained her. None of it came from luck. It came from refusing to let past wounds dictate her future. Every decision, every boundary, every no she had ever said to the wrong people had paved the way for the life she now fully owned. Emily wanted her story to reach anyone listening who had ever felt unworthy or doubted themselves. She wanted them to understand that heartbreak doesn't diminish value, it reveals strength. Betrayal doesn't define you, it teaches you clarity. And love, real love, only comes when you first honor yourself. So to anyone still standing in the shadow of doubt, waiting for validation from someone who may never see it, Know this, your worth is already set. It doesn't need approval, it doesn't need permission, and it doesn't need anyone else to assign a price to it. Protect it, nurture it, and never give it away lightly. Emily's final thought as she looked out over the skyline, the city lights reflecting the life she had fought for, was simple. The right people will see your value without you having to prove it. The wrong people will always try to take it for granted. The power is in choosing wisely. If you're listening right now, I want you to comment below. What's one lesson heartbreak has taught you about your own worth? How did it change the way you see yourself?